Brandyn, you've in the past said that you fell into tattooing by accident, which is probably something that a lot of people do find themselves, but you progressed from a tattooist and your passion as a machine builder. Do you remember the first machine that you built? And was that the start of the love affair, or did that take you down another direction or door?
The first machine I ever built, and I do remember very distinctly, I grew up around a lot of high-end automobiles. And I grew up around a lot of history. So my dad restored a lot of old cars, and my dad had a best friend since grade school. His name's Joe Renato, and he is a master craftsman. He makes all kinds of light fixtures and a lot of light fixtures for Disney and high-end celebrity work, and just he recreates things that were built in the turn of the century. So I wanted to build a tattoo machine, right? And I needed to figure out a lot of things. There was a lot of variables there. I'll give you the quick run of it. Went to my dad's best friend, Joe. I said, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. And we looked at it and we said, okay, well, we need to make a frame. Okay, how are we going to do that? So he suggested I cast a frame. So he said, this is how we make patterns. This is how we make light fixture patterns. He showed me a wooden pattern and sent me down to the foundry. I went down, I talked to the man, I told him kind of what I was trying to do, and he gave me a good idea of kind of the mechanics behind it, how much it's going to shrink, from master pattern to actual casting, and kind of what I need to make. So I did that, and I made some wooden patterns, and I took them down to the foundry, and about a week and a half, 2 weeks later, man phoned me up and let me know that they were ready to pick up. And I distinctly remember the excitement. And I also distinctly remember the excitement hitting a fucking wall, like a car going 90 miles an hour, right? Because the castings had no holes, and the castings were not flat. And I knew what a drill press was, but in no stretch of the imagination was I a machinist whatsoever. But the one thing I am still to this day is OCD, and I can't let it sleep. I could not let myself not know how to actually put the holes into the frames. And luckily I got a box of castings, a big box, and I ruined most of them. My uncle knew I was trying to machine stuff, and he had this little benchtop mill and lathe combination deal that was probably built in the 70s. And he brought that up from down by the beach for me, and we set it up, and we kind of made a fixture to hold the casting down so I could run an end mill and flatten things out, and then flip it around and hold it and drill holes. And I learned how to, use micrometers and calipers, and I started figuring things out, but it wasn't super fast. But yes, I distinctly remember that. And just the frame was, a huge undertaking. And then I had to make all the other parts. And I could buy some of it, but you couldn't really, I just wasn't buying things off the shelf. I mean, I think I might have had some extra springs and some things. So I really all at once learned how to make frames, how to wind coils, how to literally make armature bars, the whole bit, right? and one thing led to another, and I didn't have the information, and I wanted the information badly. So I started going to the library. I went on the yellow pages, and I looked up machine shops, and I would phone them and say, hey, listen, I will work for free. These are the hours I can work, because I was still tattooing. Couldn't stop tattooing. I had to make money. But I wanted to know how to better do some of this work. So I volunteered time at machine shops. I would sweep, mop, whatever it took to be around some of this stuff. Because when I went to the library and I opened up these machinist books and I saw all these machines, and my machine was this little shit thing that sat on the bench, that wasn't good enough for me. Like, I needed to get a machine that took a forklift to move, right? So I'd say fast forward like a year and a half. I was working in my first shop that I had opened on Melrose, and I had a small machine shop in the back, very small, and I forfeited my lease and found a building in downtown Los Angeles because I had found an estate that I could buy from this guy who had lost his father like 6 months prior to that. And his father was a tool and die maker. And I found that we used to have this newspaper called The Recycler. And The Recycler was like classified ads, right? I called and I said, hey, I'd really like to come and look at this setup you're selling. And I found out what it was. It was a Bridgeport, and it was a South Bend lathe, and there was a bandsaw and a surface grinder and all this shit, right? And I had no fucking idea how I was going to move all of it, and I had no idea where I was going to put any of it. But I took some money that I had set aside, and I bought it all, and I found the building, and I went around figuring out all the different power arrangements that I needed, 3-phase power, 220, 3-phase, all the things, right? And I shut that shop down, which ended up costing a lot of money because I had to get out of my lease and everything. But I moved to downtown, and somehow we got these machines up to the 3rd floor on the freight elevator. And, Bridgeport weighs about 2,500 pounds. The lathe probably weighed, 2,000, 2,500 pounds. But we got it in, and there I was. And that was kind of the entering stage of wanting to. Now, a lot of people would say, oh, wow, you must have been selling a lot of machines at that time. I wasn't really. This was funded by the drive to just be able to do the work, right?
It sounds like you were not producing a machine because out of necessity you needed a machine, or you thought, hey, I'm going to be a machine builder, this might be a great business. You went into this through passion to be a master at your craft.
Yeah, I mean, it took a while. The sales had to catch up with the craft, for sure. I was actually giving machines away a lot more than I was trying to sell them. I was funding it through tattooing. So I was lucky enough to, I tattoo for, 10 hours, in a day. I could then work on the machine portion of it for like 6 hours a day, so that's kind of how I looked at it. And that's kind of always been my approach. Like, I've always painted tattoo flash, and I've always, tried to better my skill of not so much drawing. I don't draw really. I'm more of a flash artist. I've been around like these great, wonderful tattoo artists that can sketch and draw all this shit and create, sleeves and, back pieces and things. And I can do it. But I kind of have to piece it together. I don't really see things that way. So, actually, if we fast forward many years in advance, I always felt very left out that I couldn't draw. until I found AutoCAD, until I found actually how to use CAD and create 3D models. And that's how I design everything now. And I could draft, right? So I got a drafting table early on.
You were entirely self-taught through this process.
It's always a need. Like for me, it's a very much a need. I have to do this. Like I can't stop until I've at least satisfied, within myself. So that's kind of, where that all that stuff comes from, and that keeps happening. Like, it was the foundry, and then it was the machine shop, and then it was welding, and then it was, frame finishes, and then it was, post process of frames and how to make this better, and then it was, lathe work and screw machine work to make little brass binding posts, and like how do I run production, like. It always seems to be like some little thing where I'm going forward. It's like, and I can tick it off the list and then I keep going. But I'm starting to kind of hit a point now where I've got just all these things happening all the time. And what's becoming a little more important is how do I stay focused and how do I kind of spread myself, right? Rather than spread myself thin, how do I teach other people to kind of help me, So that's kind of the new thing that I'm trying to learn.
On that note, the tattoo machine design, it hasn't changed for over a century. It's a magnet at the end of the day without a massive change to the core setup. What defines your machines to everyone else's?
That OCD helps tremendously. The kind of the quest to bring professional manufacturing and machine shop craftsmanship and merge that with the knowing of how to make a tattoo machine run properly, and also deep diving into the actual mechanics of electromagnetism and metallurgy, and like how do you sustainably build tattoo machines that are going to run for a lifetime, and how do you use some of that knowledge to like bring the the bar of your quality up. So I can just go back probably eight years or something, and when I was talking about each one of those segments leading into another like OCD segment, well, when I started to learn how to make parts over and over again, and this was all manual machine, 8 years ago. I didn't start CNC machining stuff until really like 2015, 2016. So before that, it was Hardinge is a lathe tool company, and they make a production style. It's called a lot of people call it either a capstan machine, a turret lathe, or like a second operation turret lathe or a hand screw machine. So basically what you've got is you've got a small lathe with a collet opener, right? And then you've got stops and things set up.
It's sort of semi-automatic.
Yeah, it's semi-automatic. You set it up, you set up your lengths, you set up how far you want to machine things and all the different features, whether you're drilling and tapping and chamfering, or you're turning a small shoulder onto, or a feature with a chamfer and then parting. But you're feeding a long bar in and you're cutting off little parts. And hopefully you're dropping a finished part, or at least a close to finished part. So that mindset started, you have to order the material. So I started playing around with coil cores and different material, and everybody has always kind of used low carbon steel. Okay. you always hear these stories or you read letters about different irons, and the old timers, would heat up their material and stress relieve it and kind of shake the carbon to the surface, and all these magical little mystical stories, which some of them work because I've tried them and I know for a fact that they work. But I can't wrap my every single fucking coil core in a banana leaf and cook it for 12 hours, So like I like to figure out the mysticism and then couple it with a little bit of science. So it's repeatable, at least a little bit or enough. So I would go to shops and I would go to material dealers, and I found a shop that specialized in coils, making solenoids, making coils. And I like to learn from the older generation. I mean, if you look at my library and you look at a lot of the stuff I have, it's older stuff. And there's a lot of knowledge there, right? So I kind of deep dove into metallurgy, and I figured out what actually was happening when the coil charged. And I, in a sense, put myself through a small course designed, I guess, by myself. And it's like a quest almost. And figured out, okay, I can get this material. I can then have it stress relieved by heat. I could then have it annealed, and then I can then have it machined. And the outcome is a really nice coil, right? But it doesn't stop there. Like, I figured out, okay, it doesn't stop there. Why doesn't it stop there? Because you've got this operating magnet, oscillating motor, and metal doesn't like to be amongst other types of metal when electrical circuits are, interjected. So then I had to figure out how to make the armature bar the same material as the coil core. And I even went as far as making the screws the same material as the coil cores, the same material as the armature bar, because then you've got like this really well-balanced circuit.
Is that in your machines that you build? That's how far you've gone with it?
Yeah, every piece, every aspect of the machine is definitely overthought and over-engineered.
If every part is made by the same material, then all the magnetism is going to be exactly the same, and it's going to work more in tune, like a guitar or something. It's going to run a certain way. So you've eliminated all those variables in your Feldman machines, yes, and you've made it so that it's you've basically eliminated those variables down to the screw that goes into the coil core.
Yeah. So whenever a coil core charges with magnetism, it I won't go too far into it because I've put people to sleep before, but the real like simplistic way to describe it is you've got domains, right? And I like to kind of call them like arrows, right? You've got all these domains sitting inside of the molecular structure of steel or iron, steel and iron. Yep. I use an alloy that's kind of mixed of a little bit of everything. And those domains sit in a sporadic setting. They're dormant, right? Mm-hmm. Until the electricity around the coils, it charges those domains, and they all align. And when they align, they cause a magnet, and that pulls the armature bar down, right? And then you've got your break and your contact, and up it goes. And we hope that all of those domains go back to all kinds of crazy positioning, because if they stay aligned, you've got, it's called permittivity, and that's when the magnetism holds into the material, and you don't want that. So if you've ever experienced a tattoo machine almost feeling like there was glue on the top of your coil core, right? Or you also can get hysteresis, where the contact screw kind of welds itself a little bit to the spring. All those things are going to cause the machine to not perform to its best ability every day, right? And you hear all these stories of tattooers slamming their tattoo machines on the table, and what it does is it knocks those domains, right?
Just try and demagnetize the machine.
Yes, but if you use material that doesn't hold on to permutation, you don't have to do that. So to answer your question in the longest way possible, the thing that I feel distinguishes my machines from other people's, and I can't speak for other people's because I don't know what they do, but at least for me and my machines, I go as far as I can to understand the very essence and be as responsible in sourcing and creating the tattoo machine so that I can sleep at night. So I know that I send the machine out, and hopefully the worst thing that can happen to it is the spring breaks. And that's an easy fix, and then you're back to the races. Because for me as a tattooer, the most important thing and kind of the reason that I do this is I want people to actually use the tattoo machines. Like, I build them and put myself through all of that so people love them and use them, right? And if they don't do that, I don't have craft. So I would have to go and make airplane parts or spaceship parts if I didn't have that. So I use the money that I make from the business to support the business and to buy, different equipment that helps me get better. But I look at money differently than it's a tool. It's another tool in my box. I can use it to, turn the lights on and get the equipment. But my actual payment is, I've been using this machine for every tattoo, and, I've used it for, 5 years. And if we can get 5 years out of a spring, great. If we only get 2 months out of a spring, that's shitty, but that's the worst that can happen. That's the absolute worst that can happen. I hope, at least.
I use like an iron bolt, whether it's a UNC R32 thread to go into a coil core, but I never once gave thought to anneal a bolt to put it through, and it's going into the coil core, and I know my frame's fine, but that's going to make everything run different. That attention to detail, dude, we're on camera, but my head was exploding when you were explaining that you've gone so far. I know you're not going to, some builders do it, put a brass non-ferrous or non-magnetic bolt into something, so you're just using the frame for that magnetism. But what you're talking about is breaking everything to the bolt that goes into the coil core and keeping the coil core and the armature bar the same metal.
I mean, there's a few more variables there. You can put a brass screw into your tattoo machine coil core, but you're going to run into hysteresis, and then you've got a void, and that void causes a weak magnet.
You're creating a variable.
Steel wool.
If there's a gap inside the core, you put your steel wool so that it becomes more magnetized, so you don't have that air gap?
In theory, but steel wool is made out of a different type of material than your core is. So I love all those secrets, hand-me-down secrets and all that stuff, and it's all like mystical, and I love it, right? And I don't do it anymore, but all that stuff is great. We used to take Vaseline and we jam the steel wool up into the core, and maybe it would make a little difference, maybe it wouldn't. But now I just make it to where, I literally control everything because I've got CAD and I make the screws. So the screw goes into the coil core and literally hits the bottom of the thread. So, I might have, 20 thousandths of an inch gap, which is not going to make a difference. Right?
Yeah. So you're making the screw.
Yeah. Sometimes they're store bought and sometimes they're made, but but I know that when I put the screw into the frame, if I countersink it or counterbore the screw, the screw bottoms out at the coil core with a variation of like 20 or 30 thousandths of an inch, because you have to have a little bit of variation because you're going to use a little shim, which I don't have to use because I machine all the parts.
I seen one of your Bulldog machines, and it was shimless.
Yeah, I do
just
shimless sometimes.
Oh, it was one tiny shim, and it melted my brain.
Yeah, I can do it shimless too. It's not a problem, but I'll melt your brain a little bit more. So, so you're talking about Essex wire, right? So I contract Essex wire, and they just actually make the wire for me to my spec. And then the capacitors are also made OEM. So all the capacitors that I use, there was a point about 5 or 6 months ago where I ran out and I had to use shelf bought. But for the most part, I produce my own capacitor that's made in America, and it's made under the specifications of a electrolytic Sprague capacitor from like the 60s, because they work better. And I have a box about this big of Spragues from the 60s. It's probably like $10,000 worth of capacitors.
Wow.
I go to these hardware stores throughout America that have all this old electronic surplus hardware, and I just buy it. I don't want to run out of it ever, so I just have it just in case. But yes, I get the capacitors made, and it makes a huge difference. It really does, like a huge difference. And I have an oscilloscope, so I can look and see the differences. Based off of ohms and amps and voltage. And I think one thing we can talk about real quick that might help other tattooers, and I'm going to start kind of creating some content that touches on some of these things too. But we can talk technical about tattoo machines all day long, but in the real world, right, tattoo artists aren't always going to have the setup that maybe I have or you have when it comes to putting the power supply and the clip cord, and all those things matter so much. And I want to talk a little bit about electricity, because I think if we understand electricity just a little bit better, it will change the mindset of the end user, which is the tattooer. So, as a tattooer or tattoo artist, whatever you want to call yourself, and you're in a shop and you go to buy a tattoo supplies, and you want to throw in the clip cord, right? $25, $30, whatever it is, $40, whatever the going rate of some of these clip cords are. I think that the thing to understand is you spend X amount of money on your power supply. You spend X amount of money on your tattoo machines, right? Well, the little wire that feeds it is very important, and I think it's forgotten about quite a bit. So when you think about electricity flowing, right, you've got 3 ways of measuring the flow of electricity. You've got voltage, you've got amperage, and then you've got resistance, which is ohms. So the more, okay, let's just kind of codify it here. If you take a really great machine and you take a really great power supply and you couple those two things with a cord that only has, let's say, 30 strands of wire in it, right? And if this machine runs at fairly low resistance and the power supply transmits electricity at a certain resistance, but you connect the two with the inferior product, you shoot the ohms up, because the more that end device needs current flow, right? Or the more maybe needles you use, or the more voltage you've got to use, you start to create your own problem, and you don't even know you're doing it. So one thing I think that's important to think about and talk about is good quality clip cords with the most amount of strands in the length of wire. You know, so we make clip cords here. I know you guys have some really great clip cords there that you're getting, and we looked at the website. It looks like all the stuff's really high quality. But
we have a
that's
great
something
clip
that
cord
tattooers
maker
should
here in
really
Australia, who is
Speedy.
shout out to Speedy Needles.
Yeah, Speedy Needles.
Yes.
Speedy.
Yeah, we looked at that website and it looks great, and it's nice to see people thinking about that, because that will cause a problem and you may not even know what your problem is, and a lot of times it's the clip cord,
Yeah,
because you've got to get the power from one end to the other.
It's like, it sounds so silly, but it's like brushing your teeth. You've got the world's best brush, you've got the world's best technique, and then you're putting the cheapest toothpaste you can, and you're wondering why you're not getting the results.
Sure.
It's
Right, yeah.
like we were saying before, eliminating those variables.
I always look at it. I mean, of course, I'm a tool head. I'm a tool nerd, and I've got to get really good tools. And it's only because I've bought shitty tools in the past. And every time I buy shit, I end up spending a lot more money. So I'd rather just cry once, you know? If that one tool is expensive, just cry once and get the good tool. You know, you've got an X amount of years to live your life, right? We don't really know what that amount is, but you know, we're here. If you're a tattooer, god damn, you're lucky as hell, because it's the best job you could have ever applied for, and you get paid to put silly little pictures on people and change their life and meet all kinds of new people and literally just kind of create your own schedule, and forever. Because the love that you put into it is the love that you get back. So I could go off on a tangent on that, but I try to tell, you know, tattooers, tattoo artists, invest in yourself, invest in your equipment, invest in your craft, and the dividends is so high. It's a lifetime of excellence. You know, you really kind of hit the jackpot when you know, either broke yourself into the business or, you know, somebody invited you, whatever, however you found your way into it.